What do you do when the ground disappears beneath your feet? When no amount of effort, no plan, no prayer can change what's coming? What do you do when it's not up to you? This is the hidden terror we all live with, the threats we cannot stop. A sudden illness. A war that breaks out thousands of miles away but somehow touches your life. The betrayal of someone you trusted. Or just a silent, slow collapse of everything you thought was safe. These are not the problems you can solve with cleverness. You can't reason with an earthquake. You can't negotiate with a virus. And there's no convincing the randomness of fate to show you mercy. When that kind of darkness rises, the only thing left is you. What you believe. What you're made of. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Because they lived in a world far more uncertain than ours. Plague, persecution, exile, war. And yet, they found peace. Not because the world was good, but because they stopped demanding that it be. You see, the first illusion we must shatter is the illusion of control. Most people spend their lives trying to dominate the uncontrollable, wasting energy on what others think, fearing death, worrying about what might happen. They scream at the wind and curse the tide, but never once stop to ask themselves, what part of this storm is truly mine to command? Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the largest empire on earth, faced countless threats, enemies from without, betrayal from within, his own children dying in his arms. And yet, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a comforting phrase. It is a blade. It cuts through panic and helplessness. It divides the world into two halves, what depends on you, and what does not. And in that act, it saves you. Because it allows you to put down the unbearable, and pick up the essential. So when the threat comes, and it will, what can you do? You prepare your soul. You train yourself, long before the wave hits, to remember what matters. You don't beg the universe for an easy life. You make yourself strong enough to carry a hard one. Because whether it's a cancer diagnosis, a war, or just the slow grief of aging, life will place its weight on your shoulders. That's not a punishment. It's an invitation to rise. You stop trying to make the world fair. You make yourself just. You stop hoping for safety. You build courage. You stop asking for guarantees, and instead, ask yourself one thing. What kind of person do I want to be, even if everything falls apart? This is how you face the uncontrollable. By mastering the one thing that is yours entirely, your character, your reason, your will. Seneca said, "It is not that we are given a short life, but that we waste so much of it. And nothing wastes our life more than fearing the things we cannot change." Anxiety is not preparation. Worry is not wisdom. They are just shadows in your mind, dancing where your strength should be. So replace them. With clarity. With discipline. With a love for truth so deep that even chaos cannot uproot you. Stand still, while the world shakes. Breathe, when panic rises. And remember, the real danger is not in what happens to you. It's in how you respond. Earthquakes kill, but so does despair. Illness hurts, but so does bitterness. Loss is pain, but self-pity is poison. You choose which one will live in you. Some threats can destroy your body, but only you can allow them to destroy your soul. So when the darkness rises, speak to it. Say, "I have lost things I cared for. I may lose more, but I will not lose myself." That is the oath of the Stoic. And it's not a cold, emotionless vow. It's a deeply human one. Because it means that even when life breaks you, you will rebuild. Not as who you were, but as someone stronger, quieter, more real. The threat may never pass. The storm may never stop. But if you walk through it with integrity, you are free. And sometimes, that's more powerful than safety. But let me ask you something. Have you ever truly looked at what you fear? Not the vague feeling of dread. Not the stories your mind spins in the dark. But the actual shape of it. The truth of the threat itself, bare, without exaggeration. Most of the time, you'll find something surprising. The threat is rarely as large as your imagination. It's not the monster under the bed, it's the crack in the wall. Real, yes. Dangerous, maybe. But not infinite. Not bigger than your spirit, unless you let it be. That's the second lesson, precision. Don't fight shadows. Face what is. Say to yourself, this is what's happening. This is what I cannot change. But this is what I can do. Don't inflate the fear. Cut it down to size. Because fear, once named, shrinks. Even death, The thing we dread the most, loses its hold when we look at it clearly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." He didn't say that as a poet. He said that as a man who buried children, commanded armies, and faced his own mortality every day. He wasn't trying to sound brave. He was being honest. We lose so much to illusions. Illusions of safety. Illusions of permanence. But the greatest illusion is that we are helpless. You are not helpless. You are a living mind, a conscious fire. You can think. You can choose. You can say yes or no to fear, to temptation, to despair. No storm can take that from you. Only surrender can. And here's where we must be ruthless. Stop rehearsing the worst-case scenario. It doesn't protect you. It trains your mind to live in a world that hasn't happened yet. And sometimes, it never will. But you'll still pay the cost, in sleepless nights, wasted energy, drained joy. Seneca said it best, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." So stop building prisons in your mind. Build a fortress instead. Build habits that ground you. Morning rituals that remind you who you are. Write down what is in your control, and what is not. Rehearse your values, not your fears. Speak like someone who remembers that courage is a muscle. Practice doing hard things. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because it teaches you how much you can bear. How much you can endure without losing yourself. Epictetus, who lived as a slave and limped through life with a broken body, told his students, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." In other words, the event is never the full story. How you interpret it, that is everything. A threat appears. You can say, "This is a disaster." Or you can say, "This is training. This is unfair." Or, "This is an opportunity to practice virtue. This is unbearable." Or, "This is a test of who I really am." Your life, your peace, depends on which of those sentences you choose to believe. No philosopher can protect you from the blows of life, but a philosopher can show you how to stand through them, how to lose without being lost, how to be broken, but not destroyed. That's the difference. That's what Stoicism is for. Not for quotes on a wall. Not for cold detachment. But for those moments when nothing makes sense anymore, and you still have to choose who you'll be. So choose. Choose dignity over drama. Choose presence over panic. Choose your principles, even when it costs you something. Because no matter how chaotic life becomes, you are still responsible for the way you live it. That responsibility is terrifying, but it's also freedom. If you want peace, you must earn it. Not through comfort. Not through escape. But through inner discipline. Through self-mastery. Through learning, again and again, to respond rather than react. No one else can do that for you. Not your family. Not your friends. Not the world. You must be the one to reach for stillness, even when it's loud. You must be the one to return to reason, even when emotions rage. You must be the one to hold your ground, when fear tries to push you to your knees. And you will be tempted, again and again, to break your code, to surrender your principles. To say, "What's the point? It's all out of my hands anyway." But that's a lie. The point is not control. The point is character. The point is to rise, not because the storm ends, but because you decide to rise in spite of it. And yes, you will lose things. Maybe even things you love. But you will never lose yourself, unless you choose to. You were not born to be safe. You were born to be free. And real freedom, the kind that no tyrant or disaster can take from you, is forged in the fire of the uncontrollable. That's where it lives. Not in perfection. Not in protection. But in that quiet moment when you say, "Let the sky fall. I will still stand." And you will. Because inside you is something stronger than circumstance. Inside you is a calm that no chaos can drown. Inside you, if you train it, is a peace that no fear can reach. And once you've tasted that, no threat, however great, can own you again. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop running from what you fear. You begin to change shape. You become still. Not because the danger is gone, but because you've stopped bargaining with it. You've accepted the worst, and in doing so, you take away its power. That's the hidden strength in Stoic practice. You don't beg the universe to be kind. You ask yourself to be brave. And strangely enough, life gets quieter. Not easier, but simpler. The thousand scattered worries narrow down into one question: what is the right thing to do, here, now, with what I've been given? And if you can answer that, honestly, clearly, without self-deception, then the chaos outside can rage as it pleases. It will not move your soul. You become like a stone in the river, not immune to the current, but not swept away by it either. It's not about becoming hard. It's about becoming grounded, rooted in values that do not break when the world does. Because if you don't have that, then what do you have? If your peace depends on your plans succeeding, on other people behaving, on the market holding, on time being kind, then you are not at peace. You're just lucky. And luck always runs out, so you must build something deeper. Something you cannot lose. And that means looking at yourself, ruthlessly. Ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? Loss? Pain? Humiliation? Death? Then ask the second question, what kind of person do I become when I run from these things? Do you lie to protect your image? Do you betray your values to stay comfortable? Do you blame others because you can't control yourself? That is the real threat, not what happens to you, but who you become in response. The Stoics believe that fortune gives and fortune takes, but virtue is always yours. What does that mean? It means that you can lose everything, your job, your home, your health, your family, and still hold on to your soul. Your choices. Your honesty. Your courage. Your discipline. Your kindness. That's what no storm can touch. And that is your task. To protect that fire, no matter the winds that rise. No one said it would be easy. Even the Stoics, for all their clarity, suffered deeply. Marcus Aurelius cried for his lost children. Seneca pleaded for his life when the emperor sent soldiers to his door. Epictetus was beaten in chains. But none of them broke. They mourned, yes. They felt pain. They doubted. They bled. But they did not collapse. They did not abandon their post. Because they had trained themselves, day by day, to be ready for that moment. That's the difference between a life of comfort and a life of character. Comfort asks, how can I avoid pain? Character asks, how can I carry it with grace? Comfort begs, why is this happening to me? Character answers, because I was made for this. That sounds impossible until you practice it. Until you start with the small things, delayed plans, harsh words, a broken glass. And you say, this too is part of life. This too is mine to handle. And you handle it, not perfectly, but willingly. And each time you do that, your capacity grows. And one day, when a real storm comes, not just inconvenience, but true loss, true fear, you'll find yourself steady. Not untouched, but unbroken. Because you've built your peace not on outcomes, but on who you are. That's what it means to be truly free. To walk into the fire without panic. To hear the bad news without falling apart. To face the worst, and meet it with open eyes and an open heart. This is not theory. This is life. And you will be tested. By illness. By aging. By betrayal. By loss. You will be told, this isn't fair. This is too much. But you will answer, perhaps. But I am still here. And I still choose how to meet it. That is where your power lives. Not in what you can avoid. But in what you can withstand. Not in how well life treats you. But in how well you treat life, even when it turns against you. This doesn't make the threat disappear. But it makes you larger than it. It means that whatever happens, you will not be a victim. Not in your mind. Not in your soul. Even if you are wounded, defeated, thrown down, you will remain intact. And sometimes, that quiet integrity is the only victory life allows us. But it is enough. More than enough. Because that kind of victory echoes far beyond your own lifetime. It teaches others how to stand. It shows your children, your friends, your enemies, what a human being can be. And that is no small thing. The world is full of people who crumble at the first sign of pressure. Who live in fear. Who react without thought. Who run away from themselves. But you are building something different. You are becoming the kind of person who does not beg for safety, because you've built something better, resilience. You are becoming the kind of person who sees the storm and walks forward anyway. You are becoming a lighthouse in the dark. And the world desperately needs more of those. But let's be honest, some storms don't pass. There are things in life you will never fix. Wounds that won't heal. People who won't change. Injustices that won't be undone. And for many, this is the hardest truth of all, that some threats outlast your strength. That pain can live beside you like a shadow, quiet, constant, uninvited. What then? What do you do when you've done everything right, and it's still not enough? This is where most people give up. They fall into bitterness. They say life is meaningless. They curse the gods, the system, the past. They stop trying, not because the battle is over, but because they can't win it on their terms. But the Stoics offer something radical. They say, then change the terms. What if the goal is not to win, but to remain worthy even in defeat? What if the point is not to feel good, but to do good, even while suffering? What if you could look at a life full of loss, illness, and injustice and still say, I lived with honor. I did not bend. This is the final test of character. Not how you act when things improve, but how you carry yourself when they don't. And here's what you must understand, you can't fake it. You can't pretend to be strong when you're only hiding. You can't talk your way out of pain. Life sees through all of it. It doesn't reward performance. It reveals truth. You either endure with dignity, or you don't. But you don't have to do it alone. That's another illusion, that you're supposed to bear all things in silence. That strength means isolation. That resilience requires abandonment of feeling. That's not Stoicism. That's pride. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, wrote to himself, not as a conqueror, but as a student. His meditations were confessions. Reminders. Prayers to stay grounded, humble, clear. And Seneca, who taught courage, wrote of his tears. He warned us not to repress emotion, but to guide it. To feel deeply, but not to drown. Because you are not stone. You are not meant to be untouched by life. You are meant to be transformed by it, without being broken. That's the difference. You are allowed to grieve, to scream, to fall to your knees. But then, you rise. Not because the pain is gone, but because you refuse to let it define you. You rise because your life belongs to something higher than fear. You rise because you still have work to do. Even in suffering, you can serve. You can teach. You can help someone else feel less alone. You can love, not despite the pain, but through it. That is strength. Not the absence of wounds, but the refusal to let them make you cruel. When the Stoics say, focus on what you can control, they don't mean your environment. They mean your essence. Your soul. Your direction. You can't control the losses, but you can control whether you become bitter or kind. You can't control the betrayal, but you can decide whether to become paranoid or wise. You can't control the collapse, but you can rise from it with your values intact. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe life is not about avoiding tragedy, but becoming a person worthy of standing in its presence. Maybe the most powerful thing you can do, is survive without losing your humanity. Because that's what's truly at stake. When a threat is out of your control, the real danger isn't the event, it's your reaction. It's the slow erosion of your compassion. It's the temptation to become cold, to become selfish, to retreat. And yes, those choices feel safe. They feel smart. But they shrink you. They cut you off from everything that makes life beautiful, connection, meaning, courage. So don't give in. Even if the world becomes cruel, you must not. Even if you are treated unjustly, do not abandon justice. Even if you lose everything, keep your integrity. This is your shield. Not against pain, but against becoming someone you won't recognize. And in the end, that matters more than anything else. Because everything outside you can be taken, but what you become is yours forever. So shape it. Day by day, thought by thought, act by act. Stand up when you want to hide. Speak truth when silence would be easier. Offer love when cynicism seems safer. No one will give you a medal for this. But they will feel it. Your children, your friends, even strangers, they will feel your strength, not in words, but in presence. And maybe, just maybe, in their darkest hour, they'll remember you. The way you walked through the fire. The way you did not collapse. The way you carried your suffering with grace, without turning it into a weapon. That is the legacy of the Stoic spirit. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but character. Not victory, but virtue. And when all is lost, that remains. That is the victory. There will come a day when no one is watching. No applause. No witness. No validation. Just you, and the decision to hold the line, or let go. These are the moments that define you. Not when the lights are on. Not when your strength is seen. But when it is silent. When no one would blame you for giving up, and you don't. Why? Because your values are not a performance. They are who you are. And who you are, must not depend on comfort. Not if you want to survive what life will eventually bring. The Stoics never promised a life free from suffering. In fact, they warned you to expect it. to train for it, to welcome it as part of the contract you signed simply by being alive. We suffer because we care. We fear because we love. And sometimes, life uses those very loves, family, health, purpose, to strike at us. That's what makes the pain real. That's what makes the threat terrifying. But it's also what makes you capable of meaning. There's no glory in an easy life. There's no depth in a path without resistance. You find out who you are in the testing. And if you've built your house on truth, you will not fall. Even if you shake, even if you cry, even if you wish, for a moment, that you didn't have to endure any of it. Because somewhere deeper than that wish, there is a decision. And that decision is, I will not abandon myself. Say it again, I will not abandon myself. Not for comfort, not for approval, not for anything. You don't get to control the storm. But you do get to choose whether you become the kind of person the storm cannot corrupt. And that is enough. That is more than enough. But let's not pretend it's easy. Let's not pretend that courage always feels like courage. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion. Like standing up when your knees ache. Like getting out of bed when your soul is heavy. Like taking one more breath when the pain says, don't. And that's the point. Courage is not loud. It is not glamorous. It is not lightning or fire or fury. It is quiet, and small, and stubborn. It says, I will do what is right, even if no one ever knows that I did. It says, I will keep walking, even when there is no path. It says, this threat will not change the way I love, speak, serve, or live. That's Stoicism. Not detachment, but devotion. Not escape, but endurance. Not denial of pain, but refusal to let pain define you. When Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, he wasn't dismissing suffering. He was revealing its power. Because in your response, you shape reality. You give meaning to the meaningless. You shine light where there was only dark. You show the world, and yourself, that the human soul is greater than circumstance. And that matters. That matters more than comfort, more than success, more than the illusion of safety. It matters because it's the one thing that cannot be taken from you. The world may break your heart, but it cannot break your word, unless you let it. And that word, your word, is sacred. It's your promise to yourself, that you will not be ruled by fear. That you will not become small just because the world is cruel. That even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, you will act with reason, with compassion, with courage. And if you fail, you try again. There is no shame in falling. There is only shame in pretending the fall wasn't yours. The Stoic owns their fall, learns from it, stands up with more humility, more clarity, more strength. That is what life wants from you. Not perfection, but presence. Not invincibility, but resilience. Not fantasy, but fidelity, to the truth, to yourself, to the values you chose long before the chaos began. And in time, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing the threat, not because you like it, but because you understand it. You stop fighting the wave, and start swimming through it. You stop begging for certainty, and start finding peace in your effort. You realize that the only power worth having, is the power to keep your soul intact in a world that pulls it in 100 directions. That is your shield. That is your freedom. That is how you deal with what's beyond your control. You rise. You walk through it. You live, not in spite of the pain, but in defiance of it. And in doing so, you become more than safe. You become sovereign. And then, one day, something shifts. Not outside, but within. You wake up and the storm is still there. The world is still uncertain. The threat is still real. But you are no longer afraid. You're not indifferent. You still feel everything, the pain, the risk, the weight of it all. But it doesn't break you anymore. It doesn't bend your spine. It doesn't steal your voice. Why? Because you've faced the fire and found that it couldn't reach the part of you that mattered most. It burned the edges. But the center held. That's the victory the Stoics spoke of. Not triumph over others. Not a life without wounds. But this, the quiet, steady realization that you have become unshakable. Not because you're hard, but because you've become clear. You know what you stand for. You know what you're willing to lose. And more importantly, you know what you'll never give up, your reason, your values, your inner freedom. That is the essence of Stoic strength. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't need to be seen or celebrated. It's simply there, calm, constant, incorruptible. And from that stillness, something extraordinary begins to grow. Not control over the world, but influence over yourself. Not a guarantee of peace, but the ability to return to peace, no matter what disturbs it. Not a perfect life, but a meaningful one. Because meaning is not found in what happens to you. Meaning is built by how you respond. And if you respond with courage, with clarity, with care, then even tragedy can become transformation. Even fear can become a forge. Even suffering can make you more human, not less. But you must choose it. No one can do this work for you. You must wake up each day and remind yourself of what you control. Your words. Your effort. Your honesty. Your presence. You must remind yourself, again and again, that you are not your fear, not your past, not your circumstances. You are what you decide to become today. In this moment. In this breath. In this action. So choose well. Choose to show up. Choose to stay rooted. Choose to say, yes, this is hard, and I am still here. That quiet declaration is the sound of a soul becoming free. That is what it means to conquer something greater than fear, to master the self. And that doesn't mean you never fall. You will. We all do. But the Stoic doesn't fear the fall, because they've trained to rise. They've practiced failure, practiced discomfort, practiced death, even, in their imagination, so that when it comes, they are not paralyzed by it. They are prepared. Prepared not with armor, but with acceptance. Prepared not with fantasy, but with focus. Prepared not with denial, but with dignity. And that changes everything. It changes how you speak. You stop complaining. It changes how you think. You stop catastrophizing. It changes how you love. You stop clinging. You begin to cherish. Because nothing, and no one, lasts forever. And when you finally accept that, you don't become depressed. You become awake. You begin to love what you have, while you have it. You begin to show up fully, because you know how quickly it can be taken. You begin to live like a philosopher, not in words, but in presence. And the world will feel that. It will feel your calm. It will feel your groundedness. It will feel your quiet refusal to be broken. And it may not understand you, but it will be moved by you. Because people are starving for this. In a world that panics over everything, stillness is radical. In a world that shouts, silence is power. In a world addicted to control, surrender, true, conscious surrender to what you cannot change, is strength. So be that strength, not just for yourself, but for others. Be the one who walks through chaos without becoming chaotic. Be the one who faces the unthinkable, and stays kind. Be the one who says, this hurts. This threatens everything I love, but I will not let it define me. I will meet it with everything I have, and more. And in the end, that is all you can do. You cannot predict the future. You cannot prevent every loss. You cannot eliminate all fear. But you can stand. You can endure. You can grow deeper, wiser, quieter, until no storm can find your center. And that center, is who you truly are. So let the threats come. Let the waves rise. Let the world be what it is. You have your work. You have your mind. You have your soul. Guard it well. Not with walls. But with wisdom. Not with fear. But with discipline. Not with rage. But with reason. This is the way of the Stoic. Not to run. Not to resist what cannot be changed. But to walk forward, eyes open, heart steady, and say, whatever happens, I remain. And you will. Because you've chosen something that no threat can destroy. You've chosen to live like a free person, no matter what comes. And that is the greatest power of all.